trying our best with the blue-black tempo deck, and we look into the past. What was the configuration before the Eternal Weekends, and we see how it evolved from there. And to start with the blue-black tempo shell, we take a look at a really stock list from the past. It's not a perfect list, but you guess the game mechanics behind it. You see, we played for Nethergolf, paired with 3 Tamio, with 2 Baubilds. You could also play Nihil Spellbomb main, and we played 3 Sword Size, 3 Daisies for Bowmaster, 2 Kaito to pair with the 4 Bowmasters, and as a clock, 2 Murktide Regions, and as flex card, 2 Brazen Borrower to deal with Chalice or an opponent's Murktide Regent, and paired with 4 Force of Will. And the full cantrip suit consists of 4 Brainstorm and 4 Ponder. The land base is pretty stock. We play 19 lands. We play 8 fetch lands, which are split up in 4 polluted delta and 2 blue and 2 black fetch lands to get access to the basic mountain, and 1 surveillant and 4 wastelands. On the sideboard, we played Force of Negation, Consign, Hydroblast, Barrow Golf, Shielded's Edict as a hard removal, and also some kind of graveyard or more artifact hate, and engineered explosive. That was a pretty stock build, and this evolved with the Eternal Weekend. And I took here the list from Tom Hartfelder. He played at the 6th place. I think his list is a little bit more consistent because he opted to play a really straightforward list, which consists of 4 Tamio, 4 Bowmaster, 2 Barrow Golf, 3 Murktide Regent, 1 Kaito, and 4 Sword Size, 4 Days. And the new iteration, what was also seen in Eternal Weekend Europe, is that the deck cuts Nethergolf in favor to fill out the gaps. And by meaning filling out the gaps, I mean playing 4 Daisies for Sword Size, and pair this one with 2 Hymn to tourach as a kind of flex card. There are lists which play 3 Hymn to tourach, and we can also take a look at some other lists from the event, and we see here, for example, a Japanese list, and with a slight other approach. He played 1 Snuff Out and 1 Force of Negation main, but the main configuration is really the same: 3 Murktide Regent, 4 Days, 4 Sword Size, and no Nethergolf, and so it's kind of flex spots. And he also plays 3 Hymn to tourach, but I really like the list from Tom much more because it's more steady build in my opinion. And what's the conclusion with that? So why the decks are cutting Nethergolf? I think because just a strong creature isn't enough anymore. Nethergolf has no text, so he has no trample, no flying, so it's not sure that he can get through. And in favor for that, the deck is more vulnerable for combo matchups. So you really would like to have 4 Sword Size and 4 Days as a kind of interaction. And for the clock, the deck is opting more for a steady clock in form of Murktide Regent, because one of the main weakness of the blue-black shell is that it can't really deal with a resolved Murktide Regent, because as a removal spell of our choice we have Fatal Push, which can deal with a pretty wide range with creatures, but it cannot deal with Murktide Regent. So if a Murktide Regent resolved, we can only bounce it with Brazen Borrower or tap it down with Kaito. Other than that, we have no chance besides countering it with a Daze or a Force of Will. And I'm thinking what I see here is that the deck tries to fill out his or the weakness with a pretty easy approach. So we are blue and black, and for blue we can fill out the gap with more bounce. So we can up the count of Brazen Borrower, because we have 2 main problematic permanents, which are Chalice of the Void and Murktide Regent. So, and maybe a flipped Tamio as a planeswalker. Those kinds of permanents we really can't interact with. So Brazen Bower is one catch-all answer, but it only bounces for one turn, so our opponent can play his Chalice the turn after, or play the Tamio, or play his Murktide on the second turn. So it's more like a temporary answer, and we need a really good board state to push the damage through on this turn. The second approach, which we see here, is in the form of the black mana, is really old standard, permitting the opponent to just play the card before he can cast it in form of discard. And the weapon of choice is here Hymn to Tourach, because it's at least a card advantage spell. So we spend one card, our opponent has to discard 2 cards, and the discard approach is at random. So it also can discard lands, which could be really good in some certain matchups. But the main weakness is on part of it, because you really need a good timing for Hymn to Tourach to be a good card. In the late game, it's a pretty terrible card if a threat resolved. So the approach is more like a tempo deck. You want to prevent it before it being played. But I think one of the main plus or upside with the deck is that this just plays more like a good giant or mid-range deck. You have a really good card quality. Your cards are always good. You have Tamio, Bowmaster, Barrel Golf, Murktide. It's all good cards on its own. And I think the Hymn to Tourach is more like an approach to fix something which blue and black can't really deal with it. And we see it continuing in the sideboard, because in the sideboard we see 2 engineered explosive, and 2 engineered explosive means that we are weak to some kind of permanent in form of Chalice of the Void or artifacts. So if we're playing against the red-blue or blue-red artifact deck, we can't really deal with those kind of tokens, so we need a solution to remove them in form of engineered explosive, because we don't have access to Meltdown, for example. And the second weakness is, in my opinion, that we are really weak against some form of blue control or blue combo decks. I think Jeskai Wizards is not a good matchup in my opinion, and the same can be said for Sneak and Show, because we don't have a good answer on the main board. We have no answer for anything resolved. We have only Force of Will and Sword Size. Sword Size is really strong, and Hymn to Tourach can catch some cards, but it's not a guarantee. And for this one, I'm thinking about how we can close those weakness points and with more quality, and don't interacting with the main plan of the deck. And I'm really not convinced in playing Hymn to Tourach in 2025 or 2026, for example. I don't think it's a good card. In my opinion, and my approach on fixing that kind of weakness is pretty easy. You know, I like to play blue-black decks, I like to play Izzet, Delver, and so on. And I think we can transfer some tech from the Izzet deck into the Dimir shell. I think the approach is not new. There was a time 1 year ago where the Dimir tempo decks are opting to splash red, and I think the approach is also valid nowadays, and even more. And I took the approach with the shell from Tom, and the main goal is to keep the deck as stock as it is. So we keep 2 Barrel Golf, we keep Murktide Regent, and we only want to get rid of Hymn to Tourach, and we are seeking for a much better approach to this card, which will resolve our weakness in form of Murktide Regent, Planeswalker, and Chalice of the Void, so that we don't have to rely on game 2 Engineered Explosive. And the approach which I took is pretty easy. We take the stock list from Tom, and we transferring it into Grixis Tempo Shell, and we see the main deck is the same. We have four Orcish Bowmasters, we have one Kaito, one Brazen Borer, we have three Murktide Regent, and I just swapped the two Hymn to Tourach for, I think, the best card in the setup, which is Molten Collapse. Molten Collapse can deal with all the problematic permanents. It can deal with an resolved Murktide Regent. It can deal with a Chalice of Void. It improves our Eldrazi matchup. It can also deal with a flipped Tamio. So I think it's a really good hard removal against a Barrow Golf or some other problematic creature. So you don't have to rely on the revolt mechanic on Fatal Push. So I think it's pretty good, but it comes with a cost. So the cost is it's black and red. Mana needed, so we try or have to fit in the red mana sources to cast all the spells. So I took the approach. I think we want to stay at 19 lands. We don't want to go up to 20. So we need to stay on 4 wastelands. That's the price. And I think it's enough to splash just 2 red sources in form of 1 volcanic island. So we have access to blue. And I think it's also, or could be handy, to splash 1 badlands. So it's black and red mana. And we can exit it from the fetch lands, so we just need to swap out the Flooded Strand for a Scalding Tarn, which is pretty easy. So we have 2 red sources in the main board for just 2 Molten Collapse, and the price we are paying in fitting those in are really small. We are cutting down 1 Underground Sea, and we are cutting down the basic swamp, because the logic behind is that if we cut Nethergolf, we don't rely early on a swamp. So I think it's okay to cut the basic swamp, but we have to keep an eye whether that's a good approach. If we think we need basic swamp, then we maybe have to trim 1 underground sea more, or maybe trim on 1 wasteland, so that we are playing maybe 3 in the main and 1 in the sideboard. So I think it's a pretty good configuration, at least on paper. And if we move to the sideboard, I think we see a lot of more upside, because now we don't have to play 2 Engineered Explosive. We can just make a split with the wheel card, which is Meltdown, and Meltdown deals with all the problematic permanents. We can remove artifacts more efficiently. I think that's pretty good. We are playing also the 3rd Barrow Golf in the sideboard, and as a graveyard approach, you can play Doughty Voidwalker, you can play Gravedigger's Cage. I choose to play Nihil Spellbound, but it's up to you. These slots are really flexible, but the main goal is that we can play Meltdown, and the second approach is that we can or have access to Pyroblast. I think Pyroblast is an excellent card. It helps with the mirror match, it helps with the control matchups, Jeskai, Grixis control. It helps a lot against Show and Tell, because you can just counter a Show and Tell or some other cards, maybe a Brainstorm Ponder. It's absolutely fine. You can deal with a flipped Tamio, you can deal with a Murktide Regent. I think I really like Pyroblast, and I think it's worth the effort in cutting those 2 wetlands into the mana base. And I think with this configuration, we don't have to rely on maybe a mediocre card like Hymn to Tourach. We can deal with the card which we want to deal with, so there is no luck element involved, because if we really need to Hymn to Tourach in the early game, in the late game it's more like a crappy card, but Molten Collapse is good in the early game and also in the late game, so we have a more consistent approach to the deck, and also our sideboard configuration is a lot of better. And even with the rise of Izzet Delver and the rise of Dimir Tempo, I think it's not bad to have 3 Pyroblast in the sideboard, and I think also Meltdown could be a really, really good card against some form of Mystic Forge or Artifact decks or Urza Saga decks. I think it's absolutely fine to have those in your sideboard. And we have also another upside, because we have 2 good removal spells in the main board, so we don't have to put those kind of in our sideboard. So we have 2 more sideboard slots available to fit those Pyroblast into our deck, and I think it's a pretty interesting approach. At least it would be another evolution from the Nethergolf configuration to the evolution of cutting Nethergolfs to fill in the gaps with 4 sword size, 4 days, getting a more consistent clock with 3 Murktide Regent and even 2 Barrow Golf in the main. So the deck is more on the mid-range spectrum. It's not, in my opinion, a so-called tempo deck, because our threats are really occur first on turn 3. So it's really not that often that you can cast Dimir Murktide Regent on turn 2, especially without Baubles and without a Dragon Rage Chandler. So I think it's even in theory not so possible. And I think for this approach, Molten Collapse will really fit in the gap. And I really don't like the Hymn to Tourach. It sounds cool on paper, but I think it's maybe in 3 out of 10 games it's good, and in 7 out of 10 games it's just a terrible card, because you draw too late, your mana base doesn't give it, because the deck opts to want to have a basic island to cast maybe Tamio or cast a Ponder against the Wasteland, and if you fetch for the basic island, you can't really cast it on turn 2, then you can cast it on turn 3, and then the threat is resolved. So I'm really not into the Hymn to Tourach, in my opinion, and I want to fix that issue with just the approach of adding red to the deck, light red splash. So I'm not sure how you call it. I called it Grixis Tempo, but I think it's a little bit misleading, because it's not really a Grixis Tempo shell. We don't have Lightning Bolt, we don't have Dragon Rage Chandler, we are just a Dimir Tempo deck with a light splash of red. So you can maybe call it blue-black red tempo, or just call it Dimir Tempo with a red splash. I think Grixis Tempo is a little bit misleading in my opinion, because our core is not red. We really have a really light splash to it, but we'll see how it plays out. We will run it to 1 league and keep an eye on how the Molten Collapse felt, and also how the Pyroblast and the Meltdown felt in the matchups and the sideboarding. And after 5 games we draw our conclusion, if we think, at least on paper, it's better than the Hymn to Tourach approach. But as said, theory is good, but practice is better. So we have to test it just for ourselves, and we see how it will work out.